Okay, welcome to the third webinar on paratriathlon rules. And in this webinar, we're going to focus on the fair start system, the staggered start system, and on some of the swim provisions that we have around competition rules. So as you may know already in some of the classes, we have different start times for different athletes within the same sport class. What used to be the PT5, the athletes with vision impairment, is now called PTVI. And we have three subclasses, B1, B2, B3. And the athletes who are B1, which are totally blind, are starting with a certain amount of time of advantage, and it varies by gender. The same as in the same manner, we have calculated now for the PTHC, the hand cycle, a difference in start time. So as you can see in the different slides, you have the start times that you have to keep track of and planning the start times for your race. The PTHC, H1, they start with a specific what we call the zero time. And then for those that don't have the subclass of H1 or B1 in the case of the VIs, they have to have the established times added to their final time. This you have to make sure that the timers are doing in the adequate way. And normally many of them end up adding it to the swim segment because they are not able to just create a false addition of times, but something that you have to verify as a TD. What is essential to take care of in the start process is obviously to video record the whole start procedure, and especially in those classes that have the staggered start time. You have to make sure that you're synchronizing your watches, start officials with the technical delegate, and obviously the timers. Someone has to keep a manual note of the exact start times in order to be able to assess any situation or issue that may arise, and obviously then coordinate with sport presentation in order to pay attention to the intro times of the athletes. If there is any violation of the start time, there's penalty in transition one. Up to now, we've never had a violation in this, so it has worked very smooth, and we hope that it continues in this way.
2 points to add on what Eric just explained, that the staggered start from this year is applicable on duathlon races as well, sprint duathlon races, not only on triathlon. So you saw the tables before the difference on the times. The second thing is that in order not to have any delays on the introduction and not to take any chances, basically what we do, we introduce all the athletes of the VI category or the HC category together. And the only thing we are asking is the athletes that they will start with a delay just to wait on the pontoon, so we don't have any problem with the introduction of these athletes. Moving on the swim, again, this is one of the areas that we have to plan really carefully around the paratriathlon races. And there are certain things that we have to keep in consideration. First of all, we cannot have the paratriathlon go through a surface zone. So we need to carefully select the area where the event will take place. If for a reason we need to have 2 laps, obviously we cannot have a water start, a water exit after the first lap. We need to have a buoy inside the water, and the loop should be inside the water. There are certain water temperatures that they determine when we can use wetsuits or when we can cancel the events. These are different from the able bodies, so please make sure that you are familiar with these temperatures. Especially for the wetsuit, below 28 degrees they can be wear at all times, and for the PTHC, basically they can wear above 28 Celsius or the bottom wetsuit. Again, as I said before, there are certain temperatures for cancelling the swim, which it's really important to be aware of the specific times. For the VI, the blind athletes, they are asked to be tethered during the swim with their own guide, and Eric will explain later on this rule. And specific for the B1 athletes, this subclass, they have to wear blackout glasses during the whole swim, goggles during the whole swim until they reach their transition spot. And this is when they can remove it. If you have watched the second webinar, we explained how we can identify these athletes, and this is basically the different color of the swim cap. These athletes are wearing orange swim cap, so we can monitor easily if they have the blackout goggles on or not. And obviously, if the paratriathlon races are combined with the age group events, we need to make sure that there is no overlapping and we don't have the age groupers swimming over the athletes. Tides are affecting a lot the paratriathletes because some categories they have minimum functionality function inside the water, so we have to avoid having competitions during the times that the tide is quite strong. And there are certain time limits on how much time the athletes are allowed to stay inside the water. One last rule to remember is that we have a minimum depth condition, so the swim course for the paratriathletes needs to have minimum 1 meter of depth. So for example, in the case where we have a beach start, the paratriathletes cannot start from the beach, and the start line is actually inside the water from where this 1 meter depth exists. The marine plan needs to be way more advanced. We have to utilize more resources and closely monitor, especially the athletes that they are coming from the severe impairment categories, like the PTHC and the two starting categories, PTS2 and PTS3. Eric, so in some cases, in some events, we have paratriathletes from PTHC category using these devices. What are these?
So obviously, depending on their degree of and their severity of impairment, some athletes, in order to keep an optimal position in the swim, we allow specific equipment that we have to ensure is not capturing any air or is considered to be adding floating ability to the athlete. It's simply to ensure that they are able to keep a streamlined position in the water that is enabling them to then perform in a better way. It's not a performance enhancer. It's simply enabling them to be in an optimal position for the swim, as opposed to some legs dropping because you have a severe spinal cord injury or even tetraplegia, etc. Athletes are not wearing this by choice. If they are wearing it, it actually is because they need it, and we just need to ensure that it's not providing extra floating capacity than what it should. So we normally approve these in advance. It could be that you are faced with an unapproved piece of equipment in a race, and you just have to make sure that it follows the very standard guidelines that we have, which is it cannot capture air. It has to be made out of a material that is not floating, so PVC, carbon fiber, etc.
There is a document on the IAD website with all the approved knee braces. This is under the competition rules section, so it will be good for you to print this document and have it available. Eric, is it allowed for all the paratriathlon categories?
No, this is only specifically for the PTHC, and then we will explain now in a different slide what happens with the other sport classes.
Okay. As we mentioned before, there are the VI athletes, the blind athletes, they are asked to be tethered with their guide. So Eric, can you explain us a little bit the rule and how this is working?
So we don't impose the part of the body by which they have to be tethered, but there are specifications on the kind of rope that they have to be attached by. It might be at the thigh height, the knee height, at the hip height, etc. What is the important thing is that the separation of the heads between the guide and the athlete can be a maximum of 150 centimeters. Okay, so what is not possible is for the guide to be considered as leading or pacing the athlete, or propelling them, pushing them, and pulling them. The tether is made out of elastic, so it's preventing that if there's a strong pull, at first that will be stretched. So if we see a constant stretch of a rope, we can maybe start suspecting that there could be some kind of pulling, etc. And this diagram shows you the the positioning of the athlete allowed in respect to their guide. And again, just keep in mind that it's not in scale, so you have to go by the measures.
So as far as concerned, the tether needs to be elastic rope with bright or reflective color and 80 centimeter, not meter. Apologies for the mistake. 80 centimeters long measure with no tension. So basically during the athlete's launch check-in, we need to have a pre-measure area and then take the tether from the athletes and measure it. What Eric mentioned before is that we should not look for instant conditions. So if, for example, instantly the tether is stretched, we should not immediately penalize the athlete. There are different conditions. There are waves. The VI athletes, they don't have a good ability of orient it.
Exactly.
So this can happen continuously. So we are looking for continuously behaviors, something that shows clearly that the guide is pulling continuously his athlete.
Yeah, there's no intent to correct that situation that may have been caused by a wave, by a current. As Thanos mentioned, the totally blind athletes, their orientation pretty much depends sometimes on the tension that they feel on the tether. So they might be deviating in a different direction, and their guide is going to actually, pull away to help them regain the position. But that will lead to a corrective situation, and that's what we have to evaluate before considering a penalty.
Yeah. Now, it's more common in our events to have violations on pulling or dragging with the B1 athletes. And then the way that we have to officiate this event is to have technical officials specifically monitoring this group and make sure that we don't have any athletes who try to take advantage of this situation. Eric, what about the artificial devices, propulsion devices for paratriathlon? Are they allowed in the swim?
So as we mentioned before, for the other classes, the so-called standing classes, obviously in the VI we don't allow any kind of assistive device. In theory, they're not using any of this equipment. But from PTS 2 to PTS 5, obviously there may be some prostheses, different orthotics, assistive devices that athletes use. None of these are allowed to be used in the swim, as they are considered a floating device or an assistive device that is not allowed to be in the swim. What happens, obviously, we have many athletes with a lower limb amputation, and they might choose to swim with the so-called socks that are covering their limb to fit then into the prostheses. Many of these socks have pins that actually clamp onto the prostheses, and they are allowed to wear them, but there cannot be any sharp or pointing part of the sock unexposed. So it can be inside their wetsuit, but even if it's inside their wetsuit and there's a piece of a wetsuit hanging over that, the pin or any metal part or any sharp piece or part that the TD may consider a potential hazard needs to be covered. And athletes are aware of this, and they need to have their own devices to cover it. A lot of them are using silicone caps, as you see in the slide. But it's really critical to ensure that nobody gets into the water with something that could be considered a hazard to other athletes' safety.
So one of the standard processes that we have to follow is during the athlete's introduction, a technical official should check all the leg amputees and make sure that they don't have any exposed pins even underneath their wetsuit. And if they are covered, we need to make sure that they have been covered in a proper way, and this silicone or any kind of material will not be removed as soon as they will start swimming. So thank you a lot for watching this webinar. We hope that you have found it interesting, and we really looking forward to see you in one of the next ones.
Thank you.